I'm Tom Chalkley and serve on the board of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. I welcome everyone to our service this morning and welcome visitors to our open and inclusive community of faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another as each of us explore these paths. I would like to especially welcome our guests and welcome again those who have visited us before. Visitors, it is our custom to invite you to stand and give your name and where you are from if you feel comfortable doing so. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Welcome. Welcome to everyone visiting today. Please join us after the service for coffee hour. We would love to have a chance to get to know you better. Our minister, Reverend Tom Capo, our congregational life coordinator, Mary Law, and all of our members are eager to meet you. Please feel free to approach anyone with a green cup or a white cup with any question you might have. Our service can be heard outside the glass doors at the back of the sanctuary should anyone feel the need to leave the service for any reason. There are chairs provided for your convenience. Please refer to the order of service insert for any other announcements except this one. This year's auction theme is Doctor Who, a little regeneration, anyone? And will be on Saturday, November 4. If you are new to the goods and services auction, it's the church's largest annual fundraiser. Quality items such as artwork, handcrafted items and jewelry, services you can provide or buy, all manner of super creative events and parties you can attend or host are auctioned off in the silent and live auction format. You can purchase tickets, fill out the donation form online or on our auction website. The link will be available on the member area of the new website for the church, in the newsletter, and in the weekly email updates and on Facebook page. Please give your donations forms in early, get them in early, and check the calendar on the website to figure out a date that you can have your event or party. The sooner you enter your donation form, the sooner you can secure the perfect date for the party or event. Thank you.
Good morning to you all. We light our chalice today in memory of Joseph Priestley, an 18th century English scientist who discovered oxygen, believed in the free and open exchange of ideas, and was an early Unitarian. You'll hear a little bit more about Mr. Priestley later in the service.
Good morning. We gather today to ponder the natural world, which is a source of inspiration for many members and visitors here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. There are many ways to view nature. For example, as a spiritual treat, as a resource for sustaining our species, or as a mystery to be investigated. This may look familiar from 6th grade science. Last Sunday, Reverend Tom examined nature through the lens of spirit, and this service is an intentional counterpoint to that one. If you missed it, I encourage you to check out the DVD of his service from the church library. Today, Bill and I invite you to consider nature as scientists. We can all begin to do this, whether or not we have a degree in science. While becoming an expert in a scientific field requires rigorous education and decades of work, beginning to look at nature through the lens of science as an amateur is not difficult. All that it requires of us is our innate curiosity, a humble desire to learn about what we do not understand, and the strength to acknowledge that what we think should be true may not actually be true. For in the words of astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, the good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it. And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit and to join me in saying the mission statement of this congregation, which is projected to your left and printed in the order of service. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion. And now, please remain standing and join us in singing hymn number 44, We Sing of Golden Mornings.
In 1962, one of the most influential books of the 20th century was published right here in Chicago by the University of Chicago Press. In 2012, the 50th anniversary edition was published because the book still sells, about 1.4 million copies just in the English version. The book is called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Our opening reading is a quote from the book, and I quote, "Scientific development depends in part on a process of revolutionary change. Some revolutions are large, like those associated with the names of Copernicus, Newton, or Darwin, but most are much smaller, like the discovery of oxygen. What are claimed to be objective scientific facts are often really never more than just opinions based on a culturally determined paradigm that changes over time. So don't put too much faith in science." That's Mr. Kuhn's point of view. Today, we'll talk about it from a slightly different point of view. So we're going to start with nature through the lens of science. It was advanced and advertised as Descartes, the forest, and you. So we're going to talk a little bit about Descartes and modern science, a little bit about the forest, and end with my personal observations to share with you. It's deliberately designed as a counterpoint to Reverend Tom's service last Sunday, which focused on nature through the lens of spirit. So let's start with René Descartes, whose picture is up there. Descartes made his pioneering scientific discoveries from around 1625 to 1650. He is considered to be one of the key figures in starting the modern scientific revolution. Modern science, as you know, emerged in the next 100 years as the scientific method became the accepted way of viewing the world. What do we mean? Simply hypothesis, testing, verification. This approach was applied everywhere: physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry. However, a mystery is something strange or unknown and has yet to be explained or understood. So the evolution was from the mysterious world of superstition to what we call today the modern world. The end of the early modern period is usually considered to be Isaac Newton's explanation of natural laws governing motion in the physical world, which we see with normal human vision. The world was far less mysterious by 1800 than it had been before. Much more was known about how the world worked. Not much more was known about why it works as it does. So the remaining mystery was the why, not the how. Just to be clear, let's do a quick review of the scientific method. Here it is. It's probably familiar stuff to you. However, from the personal perspective, using Kuhn's concept of paradigm shift, the change in world view in Western civilization was from an implicit trust in abstract human reason to dealing with the facts as presented in experiments that were public, that could be verified. And that, of course, was the major difference. What followed? The amazing thing called the Industrial Revolution. Of course, a lot was happening in theology at the same time. Our focus today is on the natural sciences, not the social sciences like economics or religious studies, but a word or two about us connected to my friend, Mr. Priestley. The word Unitarian first appeared in a printed book in English in 1673. Unitarianism gained popularity in England in the wake of the Enlightenment, and Priestley was one of the people who founded the very first avowedly Unitarian church in England in 1774. As I was reviewing the slides for today, Mara is up there, one of our operators, and she commented that Priestley is included in our RE program here, and she can remember at about the 5th grade being told all about Mr. Priestley. So that's a little serendipity that occurred just in the last hour. In Priestley's time, deism was the fashionable religion. Deism posits that there is a supernatural God, but that God does not interfere directly in the world. Deism also rejects revelation as a source of knowledge, with the conclusion that reason and observation of the natural world are sufficient to do what? To determine the existence of a single creator God. Still a lot of supernatural mystery remaining with the deism. The scientific method works. Modern science has produced amazing medical cures for illnesses, hybrid plants that have enormously increased the food supply. It's no point in me going on about the change in the 300 years since Descartes. Unfortunately for the human race, the same scientific progress produced the weapons of mass destruction and the machines used in 2 world wars and genocides in Asia, Africa, and Europe. Today, there are chemical, biological, and radiological weapons of mass destruction in at least 7 countries. It does make me wonder if we really are better off for having split the atom. The dismal state of world affairs in 1933 prompted the issuance of the first Humanist Manifesto. With regard to the topic of my sermon today, Article 5 states that, and I quote, "Humanism asserts that the nature of the universe depicted by modern science makes unacceptable any supernatural or cosmic guarantees of human values. Obviously, humanism does not deny the possibility of realities as yet undiscovered, but humanism insists that the way to determine the existence and value of any and all realities is by means of intelligent inquiry and by the assessment of their relation to human needs. Religion must formulate its hopes and plans in the light of the scientific spirit and method." End of that quote. Instead of the inevitable belief in the progress of the human race, we got World War II and the Holocaust. The second Humanist Manifesto was issued in 1973. It continued the same concept, but worded it differently. The 1973 words are as follows: "Traditional dogmatic or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, or creed above human needs and experience do a disservice to the human species. Any account of nature should pass the test of scientific evidence. We begin with humans, not God. We begin with nature, not a spiritual deity." But remember, Kuhn doubts such faith in science. But the humanists reply that chemistry remains chemistry, iPhones work, statins work, so let's be pragmatic about it. When you see an eastern climax forest out your window, do you see a complex ecosystem or do you see chemistry in action? Since the invention of the electron microscope, we know that atoms are real and that everything you see, touch, and feel externally and internally is atoms and energy. The ceaseless transformation of energy into matter and matter into energy that the Buddhists talk so much about. Note that I included feelings because modern science says that what you feel results from electrical impulses in your body, atoms and electrons moving about. Are you still skeptical? This is the ADP cycle. I am not a scientist. I am an investment lawyer. But all science books say that all the life you see in the forest is based on individual cells. Why cells? That remains a mystery. But chemical processes at the cellular level produce the energy for all the plant and animal life you see when you look at our forest that we're talking about. Does knowing this make it more or less interesting? More or less enjoyable? More meaningful? For me, the answer is yes. The more you know, the richer the experience. The result of this belief, I have lots and lots of field guides. Do you read 4 or 5 movie reviews before going to a movie? In my opinion, if you read 4 or 5 reviews before going to see the movie, you will probably get more out of the movie and certainly notice things that you probably would have not noticed had you just gone to see the movie without preparing yourself by reading a half dozen reviews. I think the same is true of being in nature. The next time you are going to take a long drive on an interstate, buy the roadside geology guide for that state and make the trip more interesting. By the way, plate tectonics is a perfect example of what Kuhn meant by paradigm shifts. Nobody alive before the 20th century would have thought and believed that the continents that we stand on actually drift around planet Earth. Today, there's nobody in the audience out here who would doubt that that's a true depiction of the planet although you certainly couldn't prove it. However, let's look at the other side. I recognize you can overdo everything, including knowledge. Martin Buber's famous book, I and Thou, is relevant here. For Buber, there are I-it and I-thou relationships. In I-it relationships, the object of experience is viewed as a thing to be utilized, a thing to be known or to be put to some purpose. In experience, we see our object as a collection of qualities and quantities at a particular point in space and time. There is a necessary distance between the experiencing I and whatever the it is out there. This can result in viewing the natural world only as an impersonal it, an object to be exploited by such practices as strip mining, rather than seeing the natural world as our habitat to conserve and use wisely. If you were here last week, you heard Reverend Tom talk about nature and spirituality, mindfulness, and human experience. I agree with the content of all that he said, but I personally have trouble with the words he used, such as spirituality. Remember, a connotation is an idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary denotative meaning. A little excursus into linguistics there. When you hear the word home, do you think of a physical structure, its denotation, or do you think of things like warmth, comfort, and affection? With that background, I'm going to tackle the word spiritual. For me, the word spiritual is confusing, vague, and has negative connotations from my days in Sunday school long, long ago. Does spiritual mean a Holy Spirit? Some vague emotion I feel? Something invisible and mysterious that exists somewhere unknown? Some vague thing outside me knocking on my door? Or Reverend Tom's example last week of Eckhart, the Christian mystic? Here is my answer. Agnes and I drove to Missouri to be in the path of totality, a rewarding thing to do together. Did I have a spiritual experience sitting in a beautiful prairie with my wife of 48 years as the moon passed in front of the sun? Or did I just have a great day? For me, just telling you it was a great day to be alive makes much more sense. Thank you.
For our second reading today, we will view the Minute Earth video, Why Are Leaves Green, Part 1. Minute Earth is a collection of scientists, writers, and illustrators who present scientific findings in videos via YouTube, far more interestingly than I can alone. Here they expand on a question that many of us asked and thought that we learned the answer to in grade school. Why are leaves green? But when it comes to science, every answer begs another question.
You may have learned that leaves are green because they're full of a green molecule called chlorophyll. It's the reason for the greenness of plants, from moss green moss to grass green grass to evergreen evergreens. And the reason chlorophyll is so incredibly popular, showing up in nearly every plant on Earth, is that it's good at soaking up sunlight. The more light a plant gets, the more energy it has to make sugar and grow tulips and kumquats and do all the other things plants do. But wait a second, doesn't the fact that chlorophyll is green mean that it's actually bad at absorbing green light? I mean, sunlight is composed of the whole rainbow of colors, each a separate wavelength, and the colors we see when we look at a leaf are the wavelengths that leaf isn't absorbing. That is, they're the ones that bounce off the leaf and reach our eyes. Chlorophyll is great at absorbing reds and blues, but if it were really awesome, wouldn't it absorb all colors of light, green included, giving us a world full of black moss and black grass and ever-black trees? So why aren't leaves black? And since they apparently don't have to be black, what's stopping them from being red or blue instead? Is green just nature's favorite color, or is there something special about those wavelengths of light? The short answer is that we don't know for sure. Some scientists speculate it's serendipity that plants today are green. Long ago, Earth's oceans were filled with purple single-celled organisms called archaea. Being purple, they absorbed green light and let red and blue pass through. The theory is that this minus green light was the only source of solar energy in the deep water below. So bacteria living there got really good at absorbing everything else but green. And the molecule that did the light absorbing? Chlorophyll. Maybe. What we do know is that chlorophyll, as wasteful as its failure to absorb green light may be, turned out to have other biochemical advantages over the purple competition. And perhaps as a result of this ancient biological rivalry, the plant world today is green and not purple or red or blue. Of course, you might still wonder why plants didn't develop black leaves once they emerged from the depths. I mean, they changed a lot of other things going from bacteria to mighty redwood. Well, maybe it's simply that nature isn't about perfection, and life doesn't need flawless black to get by, just good enough green. Or maybe plants were even more clever and turned the weakness of chlorophyll into a strength. But we'll have to leave that story for later.
Was that enough information quickly enough for you? You can view it again as many times as you want to on YouTube under Minute Earth. They have a variety of videos on many science topics, and they're all very interesting, and you can easily spend an entire afternoon looking at all of them. Ask me how I know. So what I love about looking at nature from a scientific perspective is that the questions that sound simple often lead to very complicated answers. Why is the sky blue? Why are leaves green? How do muscles work? Why do people grow? Small children ask us these questions, and sometimes we stare at them dumbfounded, correct? The question is short, but if you ask an expert in meteorology or biology or physics, you could receive a very long answer. Because when we use science to view the world, every answer leads us to more and more questions. For me, these questions are a form of awe and wonder. One of the 6 sources of inspiration that the UUA affirms is direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. And this is what I feel when the questions start simply and then unfurl their wings. So take, for example, why leaves are green. It seems simple to explain that leaves are green because they contain chlorophyll, which is green. But this answer leads to another question. If leaves are green because the chlorophyll in them is green, then why is chlorophyll green? And how many of us can answer that question? Not me. And it turns out that chlorophyll doesn't contain anything in particular that makes it green. It just reflects green light back at us. So it looks green to us. Greenness is in the eye of the beholder. And it's humbling to realize how much goes on in my eyes and my brain and in a tiny leaf that I am entirely unaware of every second of every day. And the questions don't stop there, because if we know why leaves are green, because they reflect green light back at us, then we might start to wonder, as the authors of the video did, why aren't they some other color? If plants could absorb even more sunlight, all of the green light, then couldn't they make even more energy? Why aren't leaves a darker, more light-absorbing color, like black, or at least a really dark green? All of them, everywhere. And it turns out that there are some reasons, we think, that they might have turned out to be green, including the fact that leaves have developed various ways of leveraging chlorophyll's strengths and limiting its weaknesses. For one thing, leaves don't actually miss out on all of the green light that hits them. Chlorophyll might be bad at absorbing green light, but leaves also contain other molecules called carotenoids, which are yellow or red in color. In fact, they're usually what you see in the fall when all of the trees turn all of those beautiful yellow, orange, red, and brown colors. Those are the carotenoids showing up now that all the chlorophyll from the leaves has been removed, dismantled, because the tree wouldn't want to waste it all winter. These carotenoids are able to absorb green light, and they use it to fuel photosynthesis. And in the end, between one thing and another, a leaf can actually use about 80% of the green light that hits it. So leaves are clever, though not really. Evolution has made them that way. In addition, chlorophyll has advantages over the competition. Leaves may have just lucked out into it. There aren't that many molecules that are able to absorb sunlight without basically just falling apart. Sunlight is very powerful, as those of you who saw the eclipse may have been warned. Do not look directly at the eclipse. So plants don't have many options when it comes to molecules to absorb sunlight. And compared to all those other options, a system that uses chlorophyll is much less expensive for a plant to build and can actually produce more energy than another system using another molecule. So plants are more energy efficient by using this cheaper chlorophyll molecule and by missing out on some amount of the light that comes at them. And of course, when it comes to evolution, energy efficiency wins out. If you can be efficient, you survive. So plants lucked out in finding a cheap but powerful molecule that they could use into a system that allows them to turn sunlight, a ubiquitous source of energy, into sugar for them to survive and produce more little baby plants. It worked well enough to beat out the competition. It might not be the perfect method, but it was good enough for them. And in some ways, that's inspiring. None of us really is perfect. Sometimes we don't even feel like we're good enough, but darn it, we're still here, just like the plants. And millennia of evolution have made it work for plants very, very well. In fact, plants have been far more successful than human beings. When you really think about it, they've been around far longer. They have survived and thrived after global catastrophes that far predate humans, mammals, even animals, really. In fact, the ancient ancestors of plants caused a global mass extinction. They triggered a global ice age. They threatened their own survival by the simple act of being able to generate oxygen from photosynthesis. And nevertheless, the plants persisted. And without them, human beings that breathe oxygen would not exist. Now there is a cautionary and tentatively inspiring tale. Leaves seem like a simple topic. For one thing, leaves are for the most part very small things, and we see them almost every day if we're lucky. But when you dig deeper into them, they become suddenly larger and more complicated. Consider that leaves are responsible for nearly all of the energy that our bodies use to stay alive. All of it. Well, nearly all of it. Every fruit or vegetable, every grain that we consume got its energy originally from a leaf. Any meat or dairy that we consume came from an animal that ate plants, or from an animal that ate animals that ate plants. Eventually, it all comes down to a leaf somewhere. So we are quite literally made of energy that began in leaves. And that in itself, I think, makes leaves worth learning about. It is certainly profoundly humbling. We can know so much about nature, and yet for every fascinating question, we can research the answer until we find the limits of human knowledge. The point at which we must simply say, we don't know yet. And some mysteries of the universe may even resist our every effort to understand them. To be honest, I usually reach the limitations of my own understanding before I reach the limits of scientific understanding. Since I am not a professional scientist, many things will always be a mystery to me. I find this spiritually inspiring, perhaps because I have no choice. It is a joy to wonder. And those small parts of the universe that I do understand are like friends that I can encounter again and again. In every leaf that I take the time to ponder, there lies the reminder of what we do know about chlorophyll and photosynthesis, and what makes the beautiful forest in front of me a sea of green leaves. So we will now begin a leaf meditation. This will be slightly different than our usual meditations, since the goal is to consider our leaves through the lens of science and to attempt to draw meaning from that experience. The stewards will be passing you a leaf for you to use and observe. And while you receive your leaves, I will tell you briefly about them. These leaves are from the blue wild indigo plant that is right in front of my front door. The scientific name of the blue wild indigo plant is Baptisia australis. Baptisia because it comes from the word for baptism, and blue wild indigo was used as a dye by the early settlers and by the Native Americans who were here before them. Australis because it is considered in the South, but it's very common here in the Midwest. It is a native plant to this area, east of the Mississippi, and its roots can be used to make a blue dye. It's similar but inferior to the indigo that the settlers were used to from Europe, and so it's sometimes called false indigo. So in the spring, you can see spires of purple flowers, just like those, blooming on the blue wild indigo, and they may look familiar to anyone who's a gardener. They look similar to a pea bloom, if anyone's seen a pea plant. This is because blue wild indigo is in the legume family, which is the family that includes plants that are beneficial to humans, such as peas, beans, alfalfa, soybeans. But it also contains plants considered weeds and pests in some areas, such as black locust trees or gorse and kudzu. And while blue wild indigo is related to many edible plants, it is not itself edible. Please do not eat your leaf as a method of observing it. Please use the four senses, not taste. So once you have your leaf, you can hold it in your hand or any other way that you'd like to experience it. You can relax your body into your seat and sit comfortably. And you can turn your mind to the complex piece of life that you hold in your hands. Consider its color. Consider its texture. Consider its size. Smell the leaf. Rub it between your fingertips. And consider the questions that you have about your leaf or about the plant that it came from. Reflect for a moment on what you do not know about this leaf, perhaps what no one may know about it. Now I invite you to imagine the tiny photons of light streaming through the windows, absorbing into your small leaf. Even now, a few of the blue and green photons reflect back at you, giving it color. Many more photons continue into the leaf, deeper. And now, at this very moment, a photon jostles within the leaf until it hits a molecule of chlorophyll and begins photosynthesis. And another photon, and again, and again, and again. Wonder for a moment how many photons are hitting your leaf right now. How much energy is it making as it lies there in your hands? What else do you wonder about your leaf? What else do you not know? As you breathe in, some of the oxygen you inhale comes from the leaf you hold. In this very moment, energy flows from the sun to the leaf and into you. What will you do with the energy of the universe that resides briefly in you? Thank you.
This is always an abrupt transition, but we now need to make a transition and move on. Carl Sagan wrote, "For small creatures such as we are, the vastness of the universe is bearable only through love. On our tiny planet spinning through a universe we have only begun to understand, our love for each other and for this community keeps us together. The offering for the support of this church will now be given and received." Thank you, Bonnie. For our ending benediction, I've selected the Hindu salutation to the dawn. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. This day holds all the verities and realities of your existence. The bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of achievement, and the pain and sorrows of losses and defeats. Yesterday is but a memory, and tomorrow is only a hope that you are still alive. But today well lived makes yesterday a memory of happiness, and tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. This is how you should greet every new day in your life when you wake up in the morning. In that spirit, I invite you to turn, rise, and greet your neighbors. Thank you for coming today.